Welcome to a Bevy of Bloods, a fan podcast of the Sydney Swans Football Club. So here we are, the Bevy's first inaugural AFLW episode as we head into our second season into 2023. So expect to hear a lot more of us as the year goes on and the girls get going for this big season of growth. So to all your Cygnets and Swanlings out there, fluff up your tail feathers and settle in for a potentially biased yarn about all things to do with our beloved Bloods.
Sydney Swans!
Hi, I'm Chris from a Bevy of Bloods, and I am here with one half of the inaugural Bevy, the one and only Stevo. Mate, great to have you here to celebrate our AFLW team.
Mate, it's great to be here. I'm really excited for this season, really excited, and it seems like a long time too. I think our last game was 29th of October 2022, so last year. That seems like a long time ago, so I'm really keen to get stuck into it.
Well, we know that the girls needing that extra time off, then the pre-season that went with it and the organisation. We'll get into all of that in a second. So, look, let's get stuck into it. What we're going to do for everyone out there is listening in, this is obviously a first podcast for us from the AFLW. It's like a pre-season thing. We're here to kind of educate a little bit. So we'll talk about last year's season, how the Swans got in, the general thrust into the AFLW for the Swannies, the preseason that we've had, any movements and players that we've got, and then we'll have some fun and make some predictions. So look, let's get stuck into it. AFLW is into its 8th year, Stevo, and last year was, we can talk about it. The Swans went into it. We'll get a little bit into it. Effectively, the D's beat the Lions in the grand final as 1 and 2 got at each other. Daisy Pearce, of course, getting her second grand final for retiring and heading off to do some coaching and everything else, mate. Anything you want to point out there, specifically about the AFLW Season 7 2022?
Just that, actually, I reckon, yeah, because it's a bit confusing with the timeline and the calendar of the AFLW, because this will be the 7th year since 2017 that there's been teams playing in the AFLW. We're coming into the 8th season, and 6 premierships have been awarded because the 2020 season was cancelled halfway through the season. So even though this is coming into the 8th actual year of competition, in 2022 we had 2 premierships awarded. So that's why we talk about last year, 2022, as season 7. This is season 8. So it's sometimes easier just to think about season numbers rather than years with the AFLW because of that messed up COVID-affected timeline.
And they keep moving it around, right? So that's the other thing.
Yeah.
So now that we hope that all the teams are in, the system is organised, they're still talking about how many games we play, but it seems like the positioning is going to be tailing out of the men's competition. So obviously we start next week during that bye week between the regular season and the finals for the men's, and then going on from there. So we'll talk about our preferences, but effectively that is what it is. So now you're going to hear it, should be hearing it to be essentially assigned to each year, so the 2023, 2024, etc. Prior to that, it kind of went over summer. The girls were playing in freaking 30-degree heat. That was bollocks. But now I think for the most part, we are organized into a winter/spring competition, which is super fun. Well, mate, look, the Swans' entry into the competition was particularly interesting, right? We had ourselves, I think it was 4 weeks to put a list together, 10 weeks of pre-season before the season started. So there was almost no time to get going. It seemed like it sounds really mean, and we can understand why the ladder looked the way that it did and how we went. But the Swans were always keen on making sure that this was a growth season. This was a season of developing themselves, understanding the players, understanding a system, putting that together. Tom Harley and a couple of the leaders were always very, very clear on all of that. Bombers, Port and Hawks also joined the Swannies for their first season last season. So we're bringing all this up because I'm sure there's a lot of Swans fans out there that don't necessarily know what happened last year or hadn't been paying too much attention, but are just happy that we've got girls in. So this year is going to be a big season for us in growth. The girls have had a full pre-season to go with it. And I guess let's get talking about some of the Swans leadership then. Coach, starting off there is Scott Gowans, who originally came from North Melbourne, mate. What do you know about Scotty Gowans as he came into the Swans and got hired up by us for our inaugural season?
He came in very highly regarded, and for his work and development, he'd coached a lot in women's footy prior to coming in to the Swans program, and you look at the way that he worked with his group of girls last year. I mean, they only had 10 games together. Like you said, they had a 10-week pre-season and then a 10-match season, and we'll talk about this a bit more when we recap the season in a moment, but the development through the season was very clear. And that makes me think that there's really good buy-in from the playing group, and that they're playing, to a game plan, and that they're behind what the coach is trying to do. And I like that he brings that into the team, that stability, but also that drive. I think is really important, and he seems to have plenty of that.
Yeah, and it seems that there's a lot of respect that goes his way from quite a few players. He's very, very well regarded. He actually came from North Melbourne, if you remember. Took them to 11 wins in 14 games, so that's phenomenal. And then they sacked him. And I don't know whether the sacking was something that was pre-organized or whether he was always going to move on after a certain time, but it seemed like there was a bit of something in it. So we kind of picked him up and got quite lucky with it. And he was, like you said, well-regarded and well-known in the industry, including coaching VFL teams, I think out of Geelong, coached the under-18s teams into a national championship. And he very much understands women's football specifically, even to the point, I think it's on the Talking AFLW podcast, which is the one that's released by the Sydney Swans, and I recommend everyone listen to it. And when he was interviewing with Horse, him and Horse were going back and forth about strategies, about football, and just general items there. And then at some point, he started disagreeing with Horse, to be like, that's great in the men's, but in the women's, this is what happens. This is what we need to focus on. This is the thing. And he's immediately started making a lot of sense to Horse about how you structure games for women differently, what they need differently, as leaders and everything, to run a football team. And apparently that just blew Horse's mind. And he pretty much walked out of the room, gave old Tom Harley the wink, and being like, "Yep, go for it." Basically, is what happened. So that's saying a lot. If our horses are really entertained and really appreciated the way that he thought about football, especially for the women's, I think we're in a good place. I think we're in a pretty good place. Other off-field leadership, we've got Kate Mahoney, which is the AFLW GM, so the executive GM for AFLW specifically, so effectively aligns with Tom Harley on that side. She comes from a Institute of Sport background. She's an ex-physio. She worked with Australian cricket before this, and specifically about women's. So there's a very strong focus, as you're hearing me, about making sure that we look after women's football for women in that sense. So the whole leadership, just like in typical Bloods culture, Stevo, and probably opportunity for you comment, feels like it's being set up rather than being built out of nothing. There's a genuine build of a undercurrent of culture here before they move on. That's the way I gauge it.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about those two, like Gowans and Kate Mahoney, they're both people who've got a very strong background in elite performance in various sports, and that's really important, I think, when you're building a new program, which it is a new program. This team has played 10 games. By the end of this season, it'll be 20 games if we don't make finals. That's still, 20 is still less than a single standard AFL men's season. It's not much football. And in a short time, it's very important when you're getting that off to make sure you've got good people to begin with and that are buying into a vision, I think. And that's what I'm hoping for with the Swans women's team. They're looking good off the field, looking really good.
Is that how you pronounce the name, Mahoney?
Maybe. Don't ask me. Ask Nod. Nod and me have quite a history of me not pronouncing names in any way sensible. He thinks that everything I say sounds Finnish, and he's probably right. I refuse
to call Dulwich Hill. I call it Dulwich Hill. I'm not doing it.
Would you say Mahoney or Mahoney? I don't know how to say that.
I'd say Mahoney.
Mahoney. Anyway, she looks like she's a good one. That's all.
Oh, this is what you get from an ethnic kid from Campbelltown trying to make a podcast, man. I'm not going to pronounce too many things right.
And some guy who grew up on the Central Coast and now lives in Finland. We got no chance.
Listeners, you're on your own at this point. Hey, mate, let's get stuck into some of the captains for the first inaugural year. We had Maddie Collier, Brooke Lachlan, and Lawrence Getty. Massive over there. It's a bit of quality, a bit of talent, a bit of leadership going on. What do you see there?
Yeah, I mean, the one that's really going to be missed, I think, is Maddie Collins. She's out for the year with an ACL, unfortunately, and not having her is going to be a big deal. She brings a lot of experience to the squad, and of course, she's still around the team. She's still around the club. She's not lost to the world. She's still on the list. She's just on the inactive list. But she's played 39 AFLW games, and when you think that AFL seasons are usually ticking in at around 10-ish games, 39 is a lot to have played. Going all the way back to 2017 in the foundation year, she played with the Giants, and then she was at West Coast for a couple of years. She played the whole second half of last year. She had a bit of injury to begin with, and she's been back fit, and she'll definitely be one that would have been nice to have. But
Yeah.
a big problem actually, and this has come up in women's sport generally, is the occurrence of ACL injuries is much higher, like much higher than in the men's game. We've got 2 on the inactive list already for this season from the pre-season, and it's something that a lot of research is going to have to go into to figure out what's going on, because so many of these women are losing big blocks of their careers to ACLs.
That's pretty nuts. And again, this is kind of pointing out some of the differences between the men's and the women's competition that just come down to biology. So that's all kind of part of it, mate. Look, we're going to not talk about the result of last year too much because it was a gross season. Look, we came in last with no wins to speak of our name, but definitely some good signs. And as we suggested, and as the club had been mentioning throughout the entire pre-season and season, that this was a season for setup, not necessarily a season for wins. Any points that you want to raise here, mate, before we moved on?
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely some blowouts. There were some results where the other team just absolutely got away from us and beat us by a big margin. But there were some really promising ones too. And that's what I talked about when I was talking about when we talked about Gowans just before, the coach, the work that he's done with a very, very young and very developing group. A lot of the players on the Swans list are like 18, 19, 20. A lot of them are playing AFLW for the first time. And even though they were getting blown out some weeks, they still got in some really good efforts. And like the 3 that I think were the most promising against the Hawks, we got within 4 points. We kicked the first 4 goals of the game, and they just came back and got us by 4 at the end, which was
I was at that game. Oh,
yeah,
so sad. It was the day before the grand final too, so it was a double whammy. But yeah.
It was not a nice weekend for Swans fans at all. and then the Bombers, we got within 4 points of them too. They beat us by 4. We led by 10 at half time in that one. So that was another one where we were in a good winning position, just couldn't close it out. And then Fremantle, who have been a consistently good team. I mean, Fremantle's made the finals 3 or 4 times out of the seasons that have gone through to finals. They're a good team. They were injury depleted, to be fair. They were missing some good players in that game, but we were leading them by a goal midway through the third quarter, and then they got us by 14 in the end. So the fact that in those 10 games, like they really did have some good efforts, and a couple of games they could have got and didn't quite get. Hawks and Bombers were both expansion teams, same as us. We were within 4 points of both of them, and there's a lot in that to make me think that there's plenty to be excited about going forward with some of the new guys, new girls that have been added to the squad in the off season, and a full year of development, a pre-season, like you said. So
an actual pre-season this time around.
Yeah. So okay, it was a none and 10 season that happens, but there were signs that they were getting better as the season went on. The wins that were not the wins, but like the sort of close to wins that I just mentioned came in rounds 5, 8, and 9. So that's building, through the year. They were getting better.
Yeah, definitely. I remember that Richmond game. We got up pretty well. I think Brooke Lachlan kicked 3 in the first quarter, perhaps. And then
she did.
and then basically we just couldn't hold on to that lead, and then Richmond just Hawks just started taking it back out at Punt Road. So, but one of the cool things about it, the place was filled up with fans, especially Swans fans, which was amazing. It was actually, you could only get in if you were an AFLW member for the Swans. They filled up. They were like, look, we've only got allocated spot for XYZ. We've only got something like 50 more people that we can fit in, and you have to be an AFLW member. So me and not his brother, Nugget, we ended up actually getting ourselves in and having a few beers and watching the girls and just cheering on from the sideline. It was so much fun. So it was extra football is always required. I'm all for it, man. Look, last year's best and fairest. Let's get stuck into a few of the players, and we want to celebrate the girls, especially in that inaugural season. So let's get into that. The best and fairest for the year was Cynthia Hamilton, sister of Alexi, which we'll get into in a second, at 81 votes. Montana Ham, the Bull, at 71 points, and Sophia Hurley at 62. Yeah, some pretty nice names there, and 3 girls that we suspect are going to kind of turn it on again for this season. You got a couple of things there about the club, mate, about what we've done as a club in itself in the first year.
Yeah, and what you talk about, like a new fresh start too. Those players that you all mentioned, they're all very young, and they're going to get better, and they're at the top of our best and fairest, and people I think saw that and were excited by that and wanted to come and watch them. I mean, Montana Ham and Sophia Hurley, they were both top 5 draft picks. Ham went first, and Hurley went 5th to the Swans, both from Victoria, which is really exciting. Hamilton is from, she's more local. She's from like sort of Canberra, like ACT sort of area.
Queanbeyan, yeah.
Yeah, Queanbeyan, yeah. Around there, and but the other 2, Ham and Hurley, they were both absolutely elite rated juniors who wanted to come to Sydney, so they nominated to come and play their football at the Swans, and I think they both got great looking careers ahead of them, and both, not even 20 years old yet, and yeah, people want to come watch that. So we had the most members of any club, 7,757 members, was the most in the whole AFLW. To compare to the Giants, who are also in the Sydney market, the Giants had just under 3,000, and they were 14th on the list. So the Swans have got strong support in Sydney. And then home crowds was the 4th highest in the whole comp as well. So 3,773 was the top crowd. Was the average crowd for the Swans at home. And yeah, that was 4th on the whole AFL. And ahead of us was, interestingly enough, 2 other expansion teams, Port and Essendon, and then Melbourne. And then Giants was 16th with 1,500. So they're doing something right. People are signing up to be members, and people are coming to watch.
Yep, I love it. And it's just extra football. And as Swans fans, seeing some all red and white out there, I don't care where it comes from. It's the way it needs to be. A few honourable mentions. Mate, do you want to take it away with a couple for yours of just players that probably should just point out and just say a couple of words about?
Yeah, massive one for me. Ella Heads. She's from Inner West in Sydney, so she's like a genuine local. They're playing half their games at Henson Park. It couldn't be more local for Ella. And she was 5th in the best and fairest last year. She played every game in her debut season, and she was one of the ones actually that, because when the stuff started, we didn't really know who a lot of these players were. Like a couple of the ones who'd played in previous seasons, we recognised. That had been on AFLW lists for other teams that then came to the Swans. But of all these young ones, there was a lot of really, really young players, and we sort of didn't really have a clue who they were because it was a new season, new team. And she was one of the ones in the first game. I'm like, whoa, she's a good player. And I looked her up. She was like 18 years old. Like, shit.
She's
wow.
Little. She's not little. She's a good size for a girl.
Player, yeah, strong defender.
She's very strong, and she's so competitive. Like you watch her live, and she's a little bit nasty. I like it. Like I liked her fight. So yeah, big fan, and big raps, especially local girl, like you said. That's always helpful. And I guess maybe if we're going a little bit of a tangent, mate, you were talking about what it takes to get some of these girls. So these aren't professional athletes, right? These are not athletes that are going to be paid, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per year, that can just pack up all their stuff, move to a new city, rent a place, and then just start living out of the new city. They don't have that capacity. They're not full-timers. These are girls who probably need to, they need to move to Sydney in order to play for Sydney, in the same way they need to move to WA, or they need to move to Brisbane or Adelaide or whatever else. So getting some players to play for the Swans from different places, like all these other states, it comes with a lot of effort on behalf and a lot of commitment on behalf of these girls who have to get over here. So having local talent is significantly important, much more important even than the men's game. That's the way I read it, mate. Do you agree?
Yeah, totally. And it's like you said that they're, in terms of when we think about like professional athletes, they're doing all of the work, all of the training, everything a professional athlete is expected to do, but in many cases having to do another job full time and then be a professional athlete full time for the period of the AFLW season, which is 10 weeks plus pre-season, but then they're also playing in their state league comps. So these women are full-time professional athletes that just are not being recognised and compensated as such, which means that the reality, like you said, of moving interstate to play means you need to plan more than just your football. You've got to figure out, what you're going to do for the other 20 weeks of the 20
Yeah.
months, 20 months, weeks. I'm struggling with numbers today. The other 20 weeks of the year. God.
Yeah. No, you're right. They're all over here. They're either here studying or they've gotten themselves professional jobs here. Like Chloe
Yeah.
Malloy, which we're talking about in the next segment, is moved over here. Like got excited and basically had to find herself, her profession and get moving with that. So, it's just the extra level of commitment. So anyone out there who's just questioning what it takes to be an AFLW player, it's not only what you have to do in the field, it's actually uprooting your entire life, heading over to another city to get that going. So it is so much commitment. It just baffles my mind, honestly. It really does baffle my mind. And that's not to say that it doesn't happen in AFL. For sure, the men's absolutely have to. They go to different schools. They got to move to different states. Go into VFL programs. They got to do a lot of effort. But there is a minimum wage over there that is actually significantly better than anything you're going to see in AFLW. And support at a lot of clubs outside the Swans is probably not there in some instances, which is something. Some important events, mate. Like the number one event that kind of came up is, of course, our very first game at North Sydney Oval. If anyone was out to that game, it was absolutely insane. Sell out, everyone in great moods. And what I loved most about it was just hearing, 10-year-old girls kicking off the Sydney chants, like just randomly throughout the game. And then that's something you don't hear. You typically hear the male-dominated voices amongst it. 50-50 in a lot of cases, especially where you are. But in this instance, it was these little girls kicking it off, and it was so beautiful. And the game was so much fun. A couple of big moments. First disposal goes to Montana Ham, our number one pick, as you mentioned earlier. The first goal went to Rebecca Privatelli, who's actually also, a bit of FYI, the first player to ever cross town from GW West to Sydney, which is interesting. And it was a packed house at North Sydney. I had to park myself in front of some bloke's house in his front yard and just walked away. I'm like, I don't know where to park the car, dude. Like this whole North Sydney thing was bollocks. So don't drive next time. But yeah, huge moments over there. A couple extra stats, mate. Do you want to take it away with a couple of stats from last year of some leaders there?
I'll go for the tackles because I love tackle stats. Sophia Hurley, she was the most. That's 44 in 10 games. So that's what, 4.5 a game. That's a good number. And she's, like I said before, like a big part of our future and one of the ones who's come up from Victoria and wanted to be part of this. And I think studies was part of the lure to get her up. She's studying, I think, is it out at UNSW? I think that's where she's gone.
Yeah, right.
But I think the uni course was part of the reason that she came or wanted to come. So she's a great one to have. Love
it. And the other one, the stat that I just as an FYI for our first year is 7 goals was the best for the girls. Brooke Lachlan, as I mentioned earlier, with the 3 and 1 quarter, got did that in 10 games. And Rebecca Privatelli, the first goal scorer for the AFLW Swans in the 9 games. So a couple of cool items there just to flag out. So look, let's get stuck straight into the off-season and into the season for this year. Mate, do you want to take it away with a couple of trades and new players that we ended up getting in for the off-season?
Yeah, well, yes, the big one that we brought in was Laura Gardner from the Cats. We traded our first pick in the sort of supplementary draft for her. Actually, I'll explain that. It's probably easier before we start this. It's easier to explain how the draft worked this year, because there'd been some disjointed seasons and confusing timings. They didn't hold a full draft this year. They only held a draft for 19 and over players. So effectively, the players who were also in the previous year's draft pool, because it was a very short gap between the two, and also because COVID had messed things up and there'd be no underage competition between one draft and the next. So they didn't draft any young players. So the draft was very small this year. The Swans had the first pick. There was clearly no one in there that they wanted to get, because the draft is based on where you nominate. So the players, because like you said, and we were talking about before, it's not a full-time competition. So the reality is that it might be very difficult for players to move outside their state. For the draft, it changed this year that you can only nominate for either the entire draft, so anyone can take you, or you can pick to be in your home state. So there was no one there, I guess, that the Swans would have been able to get access to. So they thought they'd swap out their first pick to Geelong for Laura Gardner, who's a very good player. She was the best and fairest at Geelong's VFLW team a couple of years ago. She played 10 out of 11 games for the Cats last year, including their final. So she'll be a really good addition to the team, I think.
Yeah, solid. That's really good. The other thing that the AFLW does in terms of like drawing in some talent for these for the new expansion teams that the Swans were part of last year and for this year, and I don't know how much longer it goes for, but they have what's called a PSP, the priority signing period, where the teams are allowed to sign 5 players from other clubs and just not have to trade for them. So just go out there and just go, hey, do you want to play for the Swans? Do you want to move to Sydney? Yeah, go on then. And they come on over. So that's particularly helpful that the Swans could do that. And we actually got a couple for that effort. The club that we effectively pinch those players from, get themselves a pick in the draft, I think in the first round, but that goes to next year. So not in the current year, that goes into 2024. So that's their compensation for that. Mate, we've got some tidy players. And I know we've done a video on Chloe Malloy, mate, but do you want to take it away with Chloe?
Well, when I saw the news that we'd signed her, I was like, what? Are you serious? Like, she is a top shelf player. She's she's coming from Collingwood, where she has had a very, very strong career already. She's been, twice All-Australian. She's won the Pies Best and Fairest. She's won their leading goal kicker a couple of times. She's
Rising Star.
Yeah, she won the Rising Star. She won the AFL Players Association Best First Year Player in her first year, I think 2018. She's now signed a 5-year contract at the Swans, which is the longest in the history of the AFLW. So we've got her locked in for quite a while, which is massive news for the Swans, really. And like we were talking before, how those 2 elite young players, Hurley and Ham, both wanted to come to Sydney and be part of this. And that's great, but to think that a player of her calibre wants to leave Victoria and come here and be part of this, to me, suggests that there's something that she can sniff that's worth getting herself involved in.
Yeah, that's exactly the way. And there's actually there's even more to it. So not only did she come from the Pies, she's actually Pies through blood. Like her dad played for the Pies, I think. She's got lots of family history in there. So it is quite a massive signing for her to roll on over to the Swannies. And I can understand why we should be so excited about her. But not only has she made herself into a captain, in the off-season, she had an interview with one of her ex-teammates at the Pies. And her comment on why she decided to move over to move Sydney, this is what her response was, and I just absolutely love it. They haven't had their first win, and they haven't shied away that they underperform immensely. I kind of want to be that player that Sydney were calling out for help, and I want to be the one to answer that call and go over there and take responsibility. I know I'm not going to do it all by myself, but I think in a name I've been able to create for myself to take over at Sydney, I feel I can do them a lot of good. So this is a girl who's not coming over presuming that we're going to win a game. This is a girl who's coming in here to work and to get that win, to work as part of that win. So that's just her mannerisms, her leadership right off the bat has just come across as just special. So I'm very, very, very excited about Chloe Malloy. The other one that we signed up from the Blues during that period is Lucy McAvoy, mate. Do you have any news on McAvoy?
Yeah, again, a really, really well-regarded player with a lot of experience. She's come from Carlton. She's played 33 games. She played all 10 games for them last year, and her along with Malloy is really exciting. And like I said, another very high caliber top level player who wants to be part of Sydney.
Yeah, kicks goals, makes tackles, gets possessions, gets marks. Like, she is very, very good. And those two actually make up the new leadership that's taken over for this year. So that's fantastic. And that's just 2 girls with a lot of experience in the AFLW system from 2 different clubs, one at Carlton, one at the Pies, teams that have been in the comp for some time. We've got plenty of season experience under them. This is particularly exciting. So we're very, very, very lucky to have picked up such caliber in the off season. Mate, we've lost a couple. Do you want to take it away with those?
Yeah, the big one, there were quite a few delistings of players who were sort of on the fringes list. We won't go through them one at a time, but the big one is Molly Eastman was traded to the Tigers, and she was really good. She played every game last year for the Swans, all 10. She was 7th in our best and fairest. So, I mean, it's great that we brought in some really high caliber players from elsewhere, but that's one that would have been nice to keep, I reckon. Yeah,
for sure. The other couple, some Irish players that have made their way in as well, which is pretty fun. So we've got Jennifer Higgins, Gaelic football, and Paris McCarthy from First Division from Kerry, Gaelic as well, Julia O'Sullivan and Tanya Kennedy. So a few players there. Anyone of them to note before we move on?
Oh, the one I'm most excited about actually is Jennifer Higgins. She's a real. I was looking her up when we signed her. She's had a really long career at the top level of Gaelic football in Ireland. She's had a 13-year career there, and she'll bring a lot of experience of how to operate in an elite environment, I think, and the transition from the Gaelic game to the Australian game we've seen so many times in the men's and now in the women's as well in the last few years, that it's quite a smooth transition a lot of the time. I remember watching the Irish team, like the Irish national team for Australian football live. I was over in Sweden a few years ago with the Finnish Aussie Rules national team at a tournament, and I was goal umpiring at the because the coaches had to take turns goal umpiring for some of the other games, and I was goal umpiring at the Ireland versus, I think it was Croatia women's game, and the Irish girls were amazing. Like they were ridiculously good with the ball, and this is at the amateur level. These are ones who haven't even thought about coming over to Australia. I mean, some of them are now playing in the AFLW, some of those girls who were playing that game, and they were just so sharp and so strong and so fit and so fast. And if she's been playing top level Gaelic football for 13 years, I reckon that she'll pick up footy pretty quick.
Yeah, AFLW is one of the most professionalized women's comps in the world. So if these girls are out there playing Gaelic football, which even in the men's is still an amateur game, and a number of different sports and basketball and everything, and they're just unbelievably talented, the transition over to AFLW can happen pretty smoothly, as you said, especially with Gaelic football. Hurling, it's a lot of running, there's a lot of positioning, hand-eye coordination. You've got to be super fit, you've got to be very competitive. It's a great transition. So that is a good shout, mate. It's got some nice players there. We might see some good stuff out of the Irish contingent. Hayley Bullis came from West Coast, but another one that will miss the season with the partial ACL tear. That's a real unfortunate with between those two, Collier and Bullis, that we miss out on them. Both very, very good, accomplished players, and we're going to very much miss them on the field, but that is AFL, I guess. The other thing that happened in the off-season that's just a point of note, that is just a special thing. Scott Gowans did come out and tell everyone that he was or had contracted prostate cancer in the off-season. So what that did, of course, is just like shake up everything. It's like he's got to look after himself as number one. And the great news is that he actually beat it. So he's actually beaten his cancer. He's on the other side of that and just back to looking after the girls full time. So good on Scott, mates. And for every of those men out there, get yourselves checked. It's just be a man, get yourself checked, basically. All right. That's the preseason. That's the off season rather. Season 8 in the AFL 2023 competition, mate. Take it away. What's new for this year?
What's new this year? It's going to be another 10-game season, which I mean, a lot of people were hoping for a longer season than 10 games. It's going to be 10 games again. So 18 teams, 10 games, and the same finals 8 season system for the finals as the previous incarnation in season 7 in 2022. It'll start in September, which is a little bit later than last year, and it'll end in December, which again is a little bit later. So it's gradually being pushed back, like you said, or maybe they're trying to find a place in the calendar for it. It's very hard. It was really frustrating, actually. It was so annoying just having no information for months and months and months as to when
like 3 weeks before.
And we're just watching the bloody games. Like these women are playing. They've got to organise their lives. I mean, the AFL, I think, has not been great with the way that they've just constantly chopped and changed and been very late to give information. It's annoying enough as a fan, let alone as a person that's in a club. But then, yeah, like you said, at least it's not going to be in the scorching sun. I don't know, like it's pretty hot in December, right? The grand final is going to be in early December. It could be 35 degrees in the
especially the way everything's going. It freaking could be 40. You never know what's happened in Europe right this year. So yeah, not nice. I would love to see the season start earlier. I don't know why we don't, but I don't know if there's a reason or rhyme for it, but we'll figure it out in time. There's a couple of new rules for this year, and I'm just going to read them out. So I guess for some people out there, the change in the rules, I guess just mostly interesting, but you'll see a bit of a trend here. So there'll be teams are going to work with an interchange cap for the first time. So prior to that, they can interchange as often as they wanted. So now it's limited to 60. And that is so a big change, and really going to have to be some admin staff on point there, especially the Kangaroos, no doubt. We'll just kick that one more time, get the most out of that. The boundary umpires are going to take the inside 50 throw-ins back to the boundary line. Up until now, they've been actually walking it into the ground and then throwing it in from there to kind of get the ball going further in the middle rather than on the wing, on the boundary rather. So that's a bit of a change, and throw in between the arcs will remain 10 meters into the field, like I just suggested. So that's the difference there. And also the quarters are going to be 2 minutes longer, so an extended game. So basically getting the girls up to playing at relatively the same standards as the men are, with the expectation of getting all that done while also being paid significantly less.
I guess too, with that one, I think it's not a new rule for this year, but it's a rule that's different. So if people are used to watching the men's footy, in the women's, when the ball goes out of bounds between the 50-meter arcs, it's last touch out of bounds rule. So if it goes outside of the boundary line inside 50, it's a throw-in like normal. But as soon as you get onto that wing area between the two 50-meter lines, if it's been a hand pass or a kick over the line, it's an automatic free kick to the other team as if it was out of bounds on the full, and that can take a bit of getting used to if you're used to watching the throw-ins all around the boundary line.
They have used the AFLW as a little bit of testing grounds in the past, is try to change some things up, and they have that ability, I guess, with the shortened seasons and maybe less people screaming at every decision that gets made by the AFL headquarters. So it's kind of interesting what they suggest to do, and some of it's supposedly going to start making its way into the men's game. So we'll find out where that is. A couple of extra things here. AFLW does have its own tipping competition. So if you love your tipping, get involved. Then the AFLW for the first year this year is going to have a fantasy league. So if you're a stats guru, you love your fantasy, get involved. They have the same prize for this year that the men's do. I think a different car, but a car. So you can win a car if you come first in the fantasy, if you're all about that. So no doubt Noddy will be. He's always got himself about 17 teams. The guy's insane.
All over it.
Yep, yeah, all over. We've already been talking to a bloke online about where to get these stats from and everything. So if you're not sure, ping us at the Bevy. We'll send you in the right direction for stats if you're interested. And another big bit of news for the beginning of this season is actually that the AFLW and the AFL will have the same amount of money for the finals teams. So $1.1 Australian million will be split amongst the team. Top 8 in the women's competition and typically top 4 in the men's that happened for last year. So what that's all about, I guess, is really, we were talking just before we started, we're not sure if that goes to the girls or that goes to the club, or that maybe the girls have that built into their contracts or something. Either way, it's basically allowing for a bit more money to kind of trickle into the competition. And the way that the competition is set up, and we'll get into the games and who we play, is that, teams are going to play some weaker teams if you're at the bottom of the ladder, and there's going to be hopefully some churning of the ladder through the next few years. So we want to be on the top end of all of that. The other thing worthwhile talking about, we've got a new CEO of AFL that's going to kick in for next year. We're going to refer to him as Dylan McGurkin because that's just, I think, his name. We're not sure. And he's, in quotations, asked for sustainable growth. Mate, do you want to take it away with what you think that means, or is there any concern with those words?
I think that the messaging from AFL House is that there is no clear message when it comes to this competition, honestly.
Feels like that, yep.
Yeah.
So one of the things we wanted was to take the girls out to 12 games of a year, and they knocked that back. And the suggestion was that they wanted, in quotations, sustainable growth. Don't know what that means. No one knows what that means. Apparently, they have a 3 to 5 year plan about what it's going to take. No one's seen it, so we don't know what it is.
Wow.
Yeah, so cool. Thanks. Let us know maybe one day. So we don't have a lot to work with there, but it just makes me concerned. Are they going to start putting the brakes onto this competition when they really shouldn't, with the growth that it's getting?
Why can't you just make it it's 10 games now. There's 18 teams. Just make it a bloody 17 rounds. Everyone plays everyone once. You've got a fair or mostly fair fixture. I mean, you'll alternate home grounds from year to year. You have to work that out, and then off you go. And then you can pretty much overlap it with the men's season. It can start a bit later and finish a bit earlier. They're going to have a standalone grand final on the bye week at the end of this season. So,
yep.
like, there you go. There's your season. So 3 to 5 years to do what?
Yeah. Rather than playing the first game in that off season and then the next 4 weeks of the men's competition going on with finals, where let's be fair, the focus is going to be on, have that weekend to be the grand final. Like, make an event of this. Like, let's have 5 weeks of finals is what we're asking for here. So anyway, we're disappointed. We're happy that it exists, and we're also disappointed maybe that we're not probably pushing as hard as we potentially can. But there could be a bunch of reasons for that we're not aware of. So let's keep that in mind. All right, mate. Pre-season matches. We played a couple of games so far. So, mate, take it away with those pre-seasons.
We did. We got a couple of wins, which was really great. So the first, two wins in Swans colours. One was in a sort of unofficial scratch match kind of thing, I guess you could call it. They called it match simulation or something. Was against the Gold Coast. Up in the Gold Coast, we beat them by 7 points, which was good, 7-5 to 5-10. And some of our good players that we just talked about there from the best and fairest last year were good again. Hamilton was really good. Hurley was good. Malloy, the new signing, was good. Privatelli had a good game. Morfitt was really strong as well. Privatelli kicked a couple of goals, which is exciting. And then in the official sort of AFLW sanctioned pre-season match against Carlton, we got another win. We got up by 9 points. We beat them 5-8 to 4-5, which was, again, the same players were in the best. Hamilton, Hurley, Malloy, get used to hearing these names all year because they're going to chop it up.
Yep.
Gardner, the new signing, was also named in the best. Hamilton kicked a couple of goals. Lachlan, Malloy, Privatelli all got goals. And the thing I love most about this is seeing them hit the scoreboard, because that's what we did not do last year. Like, we just didn't score goals, and we conceded a lot of points. Whatever, you need to kick goals to win games of football, and then if you're scoring, sometimes the defence figures it out because they don't have the ball as much because you're scoring. You've got it going forward. They don't have as much time to rack up a score when you've got the footy more and you're kicking goals and putting pressure on the scoreboard. So that's 6 goals average per game in the pre-season, which is really good. And bearing in mind that in an AFLW game, like sort of 6 to 8 is a pretty competitive score. That won't win you every game, but it'll win you a lot of games of footy. In AFLW, 6 to 8 goals, it's much lower scoring than the men's comp because of the nature of the game, and they're shorter quarters also, which makes a big difference. We averaged 6 goals a game in the preseason. Last season, we averaged 2.9 over 10 games. And I'm going to read out our goal totals from last year: 42204, 02744. Both of those preseason games were better than all but our best effort last year, which was that 7 that we kicked against the Bombers, I guess, wasn't it?
Superb. Yep, that's off to a really, really strong start, it looks like.
Yeah, so that's huge. And we need to be scoring. I mean, last year our percentage was 35.9. I'm looking at the ladder now. Was that percentage last year? 207 for, 577 against. If we can build those points for up and trim off a few of the against, then that's already a big step forward, I think. And just these signs in the preseason that they're hitting the scoreboard is a good start.
Yeah, and watching the games last year in person and on telly, it did feel like the back line was just gassed. Like, as you can imagine, if the ball keeps making those entries and they're having to do all this work, it's tough for them. It's really tough for them. So maybe a season of just being bombarded constantly and a good preseason and some organization and some coaching, you never know why that back line can just really solidify themselves. And if we start scoring some goals, as you said, takes the pressure off some of these girls. We spoke quickly about what happened last season. So a couple of things that's kind of changed. The first season, like as I mentioned earlier, was all about growth, about setting up a system, it's about setting up the players, leadership, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of words about intent and compete and et cetera. This year, the wording coming out of the head coach in Scott Gowans is very, very clear. He is not messing around. This is one thing that he said maybe a week or two ago. I want girls to be fighting for their spots. I want to ring them to tell them they don't have a position. Compete, work rate, keep the game intact. Yeah, he's guy's hardcore. Effort and intensity brings about performance. So he's not messing around. This guy is like saying, these girls, I want to tell them they don't have a position because I want other girls to step up. He's creating competition within the team, and I'm all for it, mate. What do you think?
Oh, that's great, and that's what you want, and this is where it's up to now. Like you can't just, at least I don't think, you can't just go into a season thinking, oh yeah, we're going to go over and we're going to play some footy and we'll probably get knocked around a bit and maybe we can pinch a win. That's that's not the attitude of a club that's got a plan going forward. I don't think. What Gowan said is much more exciting.
Yeah, 100%. A couple of like extra things there. He did make it very clear in like 3 of the last chats he had with media that he doesn't necessarily want the board to be in the hands of, the leaders and, Malloy and McAvoy. He wanted the game to be shared. He wanted everyone to work. He doesn't need these old heads to save the game every week. He doesn't want that. He wants the game to be shared across all of them. So he's very much drilling into the girls that effort and intensity is a Swans brand of football, and I'm all about it. I am here for it. Well, mate, let's get stuck into the season ahead. So next week, next Sunday, the 3rd of September at 3:05, get your tickets. I'm not joking when I say this. Last year was a sellout, and it's against GWS, our crosstown rivals. So get your tickets, get your memberships now. Do not mess around with this. Make sure you go into this game. It is going to be nuts. Last year, it was absolutely solid. Mate, the draw for this year.
I just looked. I went on to Ticketek or Ticketmaster or whatever before. It's $10 to go along and watch like the best women football athletes in the country. $10
in the world, for that matter. So
you can't buy a beer for $10 at the SCG. You can go and watch the team.
Yeah, you can't buy a beer anywhere in the world, as far as I'm concerned, for $10 these days. So, yeah, you're right. Like, get into it. Like, it's there's no excuses. If you're in Sydney, you got nothing on that day, which we know you don't for football because there is no men's games going on. Get to that game. Get to that game in North Sydney on Sunday. The draw, mate. Take it away with the draw. I know you've done some analysis of who we play and when.
Yeah, I was curious to see like what our balance of games was in terms of quality of opponents and where and stuff, because there are Swans fans all over the country. Like we've got the most members of any club, and a lot of them are not in Sydney. They're scattered everywhere. Like you've done a lot of chats with the people from WA, for example. So good news is that that WA is getting a Swans game in round 10. But from the start of the fixture, we've got the Giants at home at North Sydney. Then we've got Geelong again at North Sydney the first 2 weeks. Then we go away to Brisbane, so going to Queensland for Swans fans up in Queensland. We'll play the Lions, and they're a good team. They lost the grand final last year. That'll be a big test early. Then Henson Park against the Eagles. So that's another home one. Then we got Carlton away, got Port in South Australia. So South Australian fans get to go and watch the Swans. Everyone is getting a look. Then we play the Hawks at Henson again, and that's the Marngrook game. So get along to that one. Then the Dogs away in Melbourne. So we got a couple of games in Melbourne. Then plus the Carlton one, and then back at Henson round 9 for the Pride game against Collingwood, so that'll be a huge one, I think, and then finish up with Freo in Perth, West Australia. So the Swans are in every state that has an AFLW team. We're playing a game, so everyone gets a chance to go and look at them.
Yeah, that's awesome. All Swans fans get involved. If they're in your local area, make sure you get there. So it's going to be wicked. How does the season look in terms of who do we play in form of the ladder? I presume,
well.
given to, take it.
The AFL has given us a bit of a lift on the fixture. It's a good fixture. We play 10 games. Of the 10 games, we play 11th, 12th, 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th from last season. The game against Brisbane is the only game we play against the top 5 from last year. Brisbane came second, and then we play. Who do we play? We play Collingwood, who came 6th. We play the Cats, who came 7th, and then we've got the Dogs, who came 8th. So it's a good fixture, and there's got to be some wins in that block of games, like 11th, 12th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. I reckon there's got to be a couple that we can get in that lot.
Love it. I love it. Let's get going. All right, mate. Season predictions. Do you want to name any here? What do you reckon about? All right, let me start off with this. Sydney's best and fairest for next year. 1, 2, 3 in any order. Who would be the 3 girls that you'd be probably predicting is going to be up there?
I'm going to give them in order. I'm going to be brave. I reckon. Yeah, given we haven't started the season yet, and half of them keep getting bloody injured. Yeah. Sophia Hurley, she's my number 1. I reckon she's going to have a huge year last year. She was exciting last year. I really enjoyed watching her play in the 2022 season 7. She's my pick for number 1. Chloe Malloy, I think, is going to come in and just blast it. She'll have a huge season. And Cynthia Hamilton, she had an amazing first season. She won her best and fairest. I reckon she'll be in the top 3. She'll be podium as well. And then I got my optimistic Swans fingers crossed that Montana Ham is going to miss the first couple of games of the year, come back and play the last 6, and still poll enough votes to be challenging the top 3. That's my hope.
Yeah, I am gonna. That's some nice names. I would probably say I'd join you there with those three. I might even go so far as to probably suggest that with Sophia Hurley has a good season, but I would replace that with our other leader in Lucy McAvoy as well. So Lucy McAvoy, Chloe Malloy, and Cynthia Hamilton. Especially Cynthia Hamilton, as you mentioned there. Got to watch her a lot, and yeah, she's not messing around. She's there to start wrecking people. Montana Ham is unbelievably talented. She's wildly talented. She's a big girl too. She stands at like 186 or something. But unfortunately, she's gotten herself injured, so she's not really able to play the first couple of games, as you mentioned there. And last season as well, she, I think she did a knee, but managed to come back in a couple of games after. So she's had 2 seasons where she's not been able to have a full run of it. But I think what you're predicting and what I'm predicting too is if she plays a full season, she basically wraps up a lot of awards. She's very, very good. We're very lucky to have her.
She'll blast it. Like I was looking at the they had an article on the website, on the AFLW website, and I was looking through. It was like all of the captains. You know how at the beginning of the season they predict like who wins the flag and who kicks the most goals and all this.
Yeah.
And out of the captains, and you weren't allowed to play. You weren't allowed to nominate your own team players, of course. So of the 17 other teams, 2 of those captains picked Montana Ham when asked who would be your dream recruit if you could take one player from another club. 2 out of 17. That's a lot.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, only 2 other players got more picks than Montana in that, and unfortunately, yeah, like you said, she's messed up her foot. It's some sort of stress injury, is it in the foot? Was it a fracture? I can't remember.
It's in the foot. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's some sort of foot injury, and she missed the preseason games, and they're saying she's going to definitely miss at least the first couple of the regular season, and then they're going to reassess. That's all they've said. They haven't set a timeline or anything, just that they'll reassess it. And it's tough because it's a 10-week season, so there's 2 sides of it. There's we need to look after our athlete and not blow her up for the sake of a handful of games, but then there's the athlete who is like, no, I get to play 10 games a year. I want to play. You know,
all of them. Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's it. Like, you're like, I don't care. I'll bust it. I'll rest for 40 weeks. You know, and that's what the club doctors are going to be dealing with, I think.
Yeah, especially with the competitors like these girls.
Yeah, because these elite competitors don't like to be told they can't play.
No, she'll run out there with strapping. She doesn't care. I think she's got that thing. And like, look at just to give her an idea, she played 7 games for last year, and there's like average of just over 5 tackles a game, 14 touches amongst everything else, and just her general work rate and effort and just quality and strength. I got the height wrong earlier. Sorry, it's about 180 centimeters, so she's pretty big for a girl.
It's
and
a big unit, man.
It's a big unit, and she's wide. Like, they keep comparing her to Cripps. She's like a Cripps style player within the AFLW, and you can see it when you watch her play. So get excited. We want to see her as much as we can because she's going to be an absolute gun, mate. Okay, next prediction. Where do you predict that we finish for this year?
Where do we finish? I'll start off by saying that it's really tough as an expansion team to make an immediate impact. And I looked back at the previous seasons. So when they really did the mega expansion in 2020, they brought in the Suns, the Tigers, the Saints, and the Eagles. And then in 2022, they brought in the Bombers, Hawks, Port, and then us, the Swans. Those first 3 from 2020 that came in have now played 3 seasons. In those entire combined 3 seasons between those 4 teams, there's only been 1 finals appearance, and that was Richmond last year. They came 5th. That's only 1. And then last year, the expansion teams came 10th, 15th, 17th, and we came 18th last. So I think realistically, given how it's gone for expansion teams, I think any improvement is good improvement. I'm not expecting finals, certainly not. I think we'll probably finish in the bottom 6, but I don't think we're going to come last either. I reckon we'll win at least, hopefully 2 or 3 of those games against the weakest sides that I identified, and maybe even surprise one of the stronger ones would be nice. But the gulf is still significant between the foundation clubs and the rest. Yep. It really is. The original 8 have still taken up the majority of the final spots, and I predict that same is probably going to happen this year. Plus Geelong and North Melbourne, the original 10, we call it.
Yep. And as you mentioned,
the teams to beat.
As you mentioned earlier, the team that we have is quite young as well,
Very young,
had to build that on purpose, and as we've suggested a few times, designed on purpose to build the team up with personality and playing group and a lot of local girls, and we slowly started dripping some quality talent from outside. But it is something to consider. I'm going to be much more hotter. I'm going to go between 8 and 12. I suggest that we're going to be fighting up there we're going to get a few wins, sneak it up, get some good momentum going, smash a few of our expansion rivals, and be fighting for a potential of a final spot. That's where my goal is.
It's a short season. You can do it too. It's like a it's like a greyhound race or something. Like once you get ahead, it's kind of hard to run you down. Once you win, 3 or 4 of your first 5 or 6, then teams are really chasing, and you can. So if we can get, the first couple, if we could beat Giants and the Cats in the first 2 at North Sydney, I mean they're both strong teams, but
Yeah.
it'd be nice because then in the middle of the season, listen to our run of teams that we play in the middle of the season. We play the West Coast, who came 16th, who play Carlton, who came 14th, who play Port, who came 17th, and we play Hawks, who play 15th, who came 15th. If we can pinch one of the first 2 even, then there's 4 very winnable games all in a row.
Yep. Yep. Bang on. Mate, we're also going to hear in a prediction from Donnie, who runs Donnie's Disposals, who is probably the better AFLW podcast and been doing it for a little while now. So let's hear from Donnie on those 2 predictions.
Hey there, Bevy of Bloods. It is the podcast #1 fan over here in the States. It is Coach Donnie Hess from the Donnie's Disposals podcast. Wanted to reach out. Unfortunately, we could not make our schedules work out. Well, I chatted with Chris a little bit earlier, and he wanted me to answer a few questions here. So he wanted to know, what are my top 3 for the BNF this season for the women's team? #1, I think our BNF will be Chloe Malloy. Her X Factor, I think, is an excellent addition brought in to the team this year, and I think she is going to be not only a fan favorite, but I think she's going to be one that's going to poll very, very well. #2, Cynthia Hamilton, the returning BNF from last year. I think she is ready to have another fantastic season this year, and the youngster from New South Wales, I think, is going to be fantastic this year. And third, I think a little bit of a smoky is Laura Gardner. I think Lucy McAvoy being back in the back, I think, will be a little bit difficult for her. I think Laura Gardner steps into that midfield and really gives us a shot in the arm. She's had some fantastic performances in the VFLW performances in the last few years. So I think Laura Gardner could be a #3 in our BNFs at the end of the season. I was also asked, where do I think the Swans will finish this year? Ladder position. Unfortunately, I still do think they are going to potentially be a bottom 6 side. There are still a lot of very, very experienced teams and some teams in the middle of the comp that I think during the sign and trade period did a lot of good things and I think have improved their roster. But I do believe we will not be a wooden spoon team this year. I do believe we will get at least 1 victory. I think it could be up to 2 or 3 if the ladies can show some of the flashes that I have seen in some of the preseason games. Gentlemen, thank you for having me on the podcast. Hopefully I can join you guys for a round review later on this year. It's been fantastic, and cheers from your friend at Donnie's Disposals, Coach Donnie Hess, signing off.
Cheers, Donnie. Very, very well-knowledged guy over there at Donnie's Disposals. Make sure to follow him. He does AFLW stuff and AFL in itself, so get over there and listen to him. I also got YouTube as well if you prefer to watch that. So look, let's start wrapping this up. It's been a long episode, and thank you all for listening in, especially how excited we are about these girls kicking off into their 2nd season. A couple of things that I'd suggest if you're really interested in hearing some more about it. Firstly, the Sydney Swans AFLW Talking Footy podcast is available everywhere you'd normally see the podcast like ours, and it is very, very good. It goes into interviews with the CEOs. It goes into interviews with the people who started off the AFLW. It goes into interviews with our executive GM. It goes into interviews with Scott. It goes into interviews with all of the girls that play as well. So it's very, very interesting, great insight, very fun, very loose. And it actually, especially in the first few episodes, it's built with a lot of emotion as we led into this first inaugural season of the AFLW. It's fascinating to hear how it came together. It came together seemingly rushed, but there was very decisive and clear messaging and decisions all the way through that process. So definitely get involved in that. And then there are a couple of decent podcasts out there that do some stuff, and we'll probably start plastering that as the season goes on. If you're interested, we are going to be doing a review of every game in the AFLW for this season. So we'll have the men's and the AFLW separated with each other. And so if you want to get twice as much footy, you know where to come hit up your bevy. Mate, anything on your side we need to raise in one last thing?
Oh, just that I'm stoked to have the season starting in like less than 2 weeks now, a bit over a week, and yeah, I wish I could be there. I mean, I really would love to be able to go. Because of flight schedules and work and stuff, I still haven't been able to see a live AFLW game, so I'm stinging to get over, and I'm really envious of all of you who can go along to North Sydney next week and cheer for them.
Yeah, it's going to go absolutely off. Well, look, that brings us to the end of the episode, but the beginning of the AFLW season. So get excited and get around it. So as always, we'll see you at North Sydney Oval next Sunday. But until then, up the Bloods and can you Swannies.